Boss replaced me with his 25-year-old nephew, but he forgot about my secret project that saved the company. Of course, I replied, my voice steady despite the sudden knot in my stomach. I'll be right there. Rachel, can you come to my office? Mr. Aldridge's voice carried that artificial cheeriness that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. In 10 years at Aldridge Global Solutions, I'd learned to read the subtle shifts in my boss's tone. This one spelled trouble. The clock on my desk showed 3:17 p.m. when my office phone rang. I remember this detail vividly, how time seemed to freeze in that moment before everything changed. Rachel, come in, Mr. Aldridge boomed, gesturing expansively as though welcoming me to a party rather than whatever this was. Have you met my nephew, Logan? I took a deep breath and smoothed down my charcoal gray blazer, a ritual that had become my armor over the years. My colleagues glanced up briefly as I walked the long corridor toward the corner office, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and something else. Was that pity? Somehow they knew what I was only beginning to suspect. The glass walls of Mr. Aldridge's office offered no privacy, and as I approached, I noticed he wasn't alone. A young man in an expensive but ill-fitting suit lounged in one of the visitor chairs, scrolling through his phone with casual disinterest. He couldn't have been more than 25, with that specific kind of confidence that comes not from achievement, but from never having faced real failure. So this was the infamous nephew. The family resemblance was there, the same square jaw and calculating eyes, but where Mr. Aldridge had at least earned his position through decades of work and considerable family connections, this young man had only the latter. Logan barely looked up from his phone, giving my hand a limp shake before returning to whatever was apparently more engaging on his screen. I don't believe I've had the pleasure, I said, extending my hand. Congratulations, I offered, settling into the other visitor chair, the tension in my shoulders building. What brings you to AGS? Mr. Aldridge cleared his throat and shuffled some papers on his desk. Another tell? In a decade of overseeing operations, I'd watched him do this exact routine before delivering bad news to vendors we were cutting ties with. Logan just finished his MBA at Wharton, Mr. Aldridge announced proudly, as though this fact alone was sufficient explanation for his presence. Top of his class, well, nearly. Time seemed to slow as I processed what was happening. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I'd seen this coming in small ways, being excluded from strategy meetings over the last few months. Decisions being made without my input, Mr. Aldridge suddenly questioning processes I'd perfected years ago. That's actually why I called you in, Rachel. We're making some organizational changes. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You know how it is, companies need fresh blood, new perspectives. You're letting me go, I stated plainly, refusing to let my voice waver. And nepotism, apparently, I said before I could stop myself. Mr. Aldridge had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable before his practiced corporate mask slipped back into place. I prefer to think of it as making room for fresh ideas. The board has been pushing for innovation, younger talent. Logan finally looked up from his phone, his expression a mixture of affront and amusement. I have an MBA. The irony was almost laughable. I'd been begging for budget to implement advanced supply chain management software for 2 years while Mr. Aldridge insisted on proven methods. Now suddenly he was a champion of digital transformation? Mr. Aldridge waved his hand dismissively. Now, Rachel, no need to be dramatic. You've done fine work here, but times change. Business evolves. Logan brings a perspective more in tune with modern logistics and digital transformation. So do I replied coolly. Along with 10 years of building this company's operations from the ground up. Of course, I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. When would you like my resignation? Well, that's the thing. Mr. Aldridge leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially, as though we were still on the same team. The board would prefer if we handled this as a termination rather than a resignation. Severance package, of course, but effective immediately. My heart pounded against my ribcage. Immediate termination. No transition period. No chance to say goodbye to the vendors I'd cultivated relationships with for a decade. No opportunity to wrap up ongoing projects. I see. I maintained my composure through sheer force of will. May I ask what precipitated this sudden decision? Mr. Aldridge shifted uncomfortably. Business decisions don't require explanation, Rachel. You know that. Translation: the explanation would make him look bad. Will I have time to collect my things? I asked, already mentally cataloging what personal items I'd accumulated in my office over 10 years. HR will pack them for you, Mr. Aldridge replied. Not meeting my eyes. Security policy, you understand. I did understand. I understood completely. I was being walked out like a criminal after giving this company a decade of my life. After missing my grandmother's funeral to close a critical supply deal. After working through pneumonia because Mr. Aldridge couldn't handle the quarterly vendor review alone. I didn't touch the folder. And my stock options? Your severance package is quite generous, he continued, sliding a folder across the desk. 6 months' salary, health benefits through the end of the year. A flicker of something, annoyance, worry, crossed his face. As per your contract, unvested options are forfeited upon termination. Of course, the substantial options that would have vested in just 3 months. How convenient for the company. Balance sheet. I stood, smoothing my blazer again. I'll have my lawyer review the paperwork. Rachel, Mr. Aldridge said, his tone softening artificially, don't be difficult about this. You've been a valuable member of the team. But it's time for new blood. Logan here is going to revolutionize our supply chain management. At the mention of his name, Logan glanced up, offering a smug smile that made my blood boil. Don't worry, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I'll take good care of your vendors. My vendors. The relationships I'd cultivated over years of lunches, late-night emergency calls, painstaking negotiations. The intricate web of mutual favors and understanding that kept our production running smoothly even when competitors faced constant disruptions. I'm sure you'll do your best. I replied with a practiced professional smile that revealed nothing of the rage and pain churning inside me. As I turned to leave, Mr. Aldridge called after me. Rachel, I hope there are no hard feelings. Business is business after all. I paused at the door, considering my words carefully. A decade of diplomatic vendor negotiations had taught me the value of restraint. I turned back to face him, my expression perfectly neutral. No hard feelings at all, Mr. Aldridge. I wish you and Logan the best of luck. I allowed myself one small, knowing smile. I suspect you're going to need it. The walk to the elevator was the longest of my life. Colleagues averted their eyes as I passed, the news having somehow spread already. Only my assistant, May, had the courage to meet my gaze, her eyes wide with shock and dismay. I gave her a slight shake of my head. Now wasn't the time. The security guard who escorted me out had the grace to look embarrassed. Sorry about this, Miss Kim. Policy and all that. It's fine, Dave, I assured him, handing over my access badge. Not your decision. Outside in the parking lot, I finally allowed myself a moment to breathe. 10 years, gone in a 15-minute meeting. A decade of sacrifices, of missed family events, of stress-induced migraines and 3 a.m. crisis calls. All erased by nepotism and corporate drama. But as I slid into the driver's seat of my car, a strange calm settled over me. I opened my personal phone and scrolled to a contact labeled simply Dover. My finger hovered over the number for just a moment before I pressed call.
Ms. Murphy?
It's Rachel Kim. Yes, I believe we need to move forward with that contingency plan we discussed. Effective immediately. As I pulled out of the AGS parking lot for the last time, I allowed myself a small, genuine smile. Mr. Aldridge thought he was being clever, replacing me with his nephew. What he didn't realize was that I'd seen this coming months ago. And unlike him, I'd prepared accordingly. He had no idea about the card I had quietly placed up my sleeve. And by the time he figured it out, it would be far too late. 6 months earlier, I sat across from Eleanor Murphy, the CEO of Dover Materials, in a small cafe 3 towns over from our respective offices. The location was deliberately chosen, far enough that we wouldn't run into anyone from either company, but not so distant as to raise eyebrows if someone checked my mileage reports. Are you absolutely certain about this, Rachel? Eleanor asked, sliding the final partnership agreement across the table. It's a significant investment. I nodded, taking a sip of my espresso to hide my nervousness. I've been watching the signs for months. Aldridge is making increasingly erratic decisions, cutting corners that shouldn't be cut. He's always been difficult to work with. Eleanor conceded. But that's hardly unusual for CEOs. This is different, I insisted. Last quarter, he rejected 3 essential equipment upgrades that would have prevented the production delay we experienced in March. Then he blamed my team for the fallout. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. And you think he's setting you up to take a fall? I know he is. I pulled out my tablet and showed her the org chart for our new innovation task force, a group consisting entirely of Aldridge's personal connections, with not a single operations expert among them. Notice anyone missing? You, she observed. Me and everyone who reports directly to me. I swiped to show her more documents. Meanwhile, he's been having private meetings with the board, discussing operational restructuring without involving the actual head of operations. Eleanor studied me for a long moment. We'd worked together for 8 years, built a relationship founded on mutual respect and professionalism. Dover Materials was our largest supplier, providing specialized components that formed the backbone of our product line. Without them, AGS would collapse within weeks. I've worked with enough companies to recognize a power play when I see one, she finally said. But becoming a silent partner in Dover, that's a bold move, Rachel. I smiled tightly. I prefer to think of it as insurance. A significant chunk of my savings invested in a company I believe in, with people I trust. And if Aldridge discovers one of his executives has a financial stake in his primary supplier? On paper, Aurora Holdings is making the investment, not Rachel Kim. Everything is legal, above board. I shrugged. Besides, there's no company policy against personal investments. The waiter refilled our water glasses, and we waited until he was out of earshot before continuing. The board has approved the partnership, Eleanor confirmed. They appreciate the injection of capital, especially with their Eastern facility expansion coming up. But they're curious about the silent partner aspect. It's simple, I explained. I need leverage, not attention. If things go south at AGS, I want options. Eleanor nodded slowly. And what does your husband think about investing your savings this way? Daniel trusts my judgment. He's seen firsthand how Aldridge operates. I didn't mention the arguments we'd had, Daniel's concern that I was being paranoid, that surely a decade of loyal service counted for something. How do you explain corporate instinct to someone who's never worked in a cutthroat environment? I signed the final document with a steady hand, though my heart was racing. $300,000, nearly everything we'd saved for the past decade, now converted to a 7% ownership stake in Dover Materials. Not enough to control company decisions, but enough to have a voice, enough to be in the room. I'll file these today, Eleanor said, gathering the paperwork. Effective immediately, Aurora Holdings, you are a silent partner in Dover Materials. Only myself and the board chair will know your identity. Thank you, Eleanor. I felt a strange mixture of relief and terror. I just made the biggest financial gamble of my life based on nothing more than intuition and scattered evidence. As we walked to our cars, Eleanor paused. Rachel, there's something else you should know. Aldridge has been making inquiries about our client list. My blood ran cold. He's looking for direct connections to our customers. Precisely. Testing if he can cut out the middleman, you and deal directly with us. Can he? Eleanor smiled, a sharp expression that reminded me why she'd risen to CEO in a male-dominated industry. Not without violating at least 3 contractual clauses. And not without me allowing it. I felt a surge of gratitude. I appreciate the heads up. Partners look out for each other, she said simply. Let's hope your insurance policy never needs to pay out. As I drove home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time since noticing Aldridge's shifting behavior, I had control again. I had options. If the worst happened, if my fears proved correct, I wouldn't be left powerless. What I couldn't have predicted was how quickly that insurance policy would become necessary, or how spectacularly it would pay off. 1 week after my unceremonious departure from Aldridge Global Solutions, I was enjoying my morning coffee on my patio when my phone rang. Eleanor Murphy's name flashed on the screen. Rachel. Eleanor's voice was tense. Have you met Logan Aldridge? I set down my cup, briefly, during my termination meeting. Why? Because he just left my office after what he called a vendor relationship reset meeting. The edge in Eleanor's voice told me everything I needed to know before she continued. I've dealt with arrogant executives for 20 years, but this boy takes the cake. What happened? I asked, though I could already guess. He strutted in here like he owned the place. 20 minutes late, didn't apologize. Then proceeded to inform me, that AGS is revising all vendor arrangements, effective immediately. I leaned back in my chair. Let me guess. He wants better terms. Better? He wants to slash your standard order by 30% while demanding we maintain the volume discount. He wants extended payment terms, net 90 instead of net 30. And he expects priority shipping on everything, including rush orders, at no additional cost. I couldn't help but laugh. He's trying to flex. He's trying to commit corporate stupidity, Eleanor snapped. Those terms would lose us money on every order. When I explained basic economics to him, he actually said, and I'm quoting here, "That sounds like a you problem, not an us problem." I winced. Having worked with Dover Materials for years, I knew their firm stance on respect in business relationships. Eleanor Murphy hadn't built a $400 million company by allowing clients to bully her. What did you tell him? I reminded him that our contract with AGS was negotiated in good faith and includes very specific terms regarding changes and notifications. Then he had the audacity to imply that Dover should be grateful for AGS's business and that other suppliers would jump at the opportunity. I nearly choked on my coffee. He threatened to replace Dover? With whom exactly? There are only 3 manufacturers in North America with your certifications, and the other 2 are booked solid for the next 8 months. Precisely what I told him. He then suggested overseas options. This time, I did laugh out loud. The parts would need complete recertification. The testing alone would take 6 months, minimum. Indeed. Eleanor's voice grew quieter. Rachel, I didn't call just to complain. He also mentioned something about clearing out deadwood and fixing your mistakes. He implied that you'd been giving Dover preferential treatment in exchange for personal considerations. My amusement vanished instantly. He's accusing me of taking kickbacks? Not in those exact words, but the implication was clear. He's laying groundwork to blame supply chain disruptions on your supposed mismanagement. Hot anger coursed through me. I'd spent years building AGS's supply chain into one of the most efficient in the industry. Every deal I'd negotiated had been documented, reviewed, and approved. To have my professional reputation smeared by an entitled nepotism case was infuriating. You and I both know that's absurd, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Of course it is. That's why I'm calling. I wanted you to know what's happening, and she hesitated. As Dover's silent partner, I need your input on how to respond. I took a deep breath, considering my options. The vindictive part of me wanted to tell Eleanor to invoke every punitive clause in their contract immediately. But the businesswoman in me recognized a more strategic approach. What did you tell him? I asked. That Dover would review his requests and respond accordingly. He seemed to take that as capitulation. He actually smirked as he left. I smiled despite my anger. Perfect. Follow your standard policies. No special treatment, no retribution, just business as usual, according to the exact letter of your contracts. You don't want special handling? Eleanor sounded surprised. I want him to experience the consequences of his actions naturally, I explained. AGS has received preferential treatment for years. Rush orders accommodated without rush fees, minor contract adjustments without renegotiation, flexibility on payment terms during tight months, not because of kickbacks, but because of relationships built on mutual respect and trust. Relationships you built, Eleanor noted. Exactly. Logan doesn't understand that business is about more than numbers on a page. He doesn't realize that the standard terms in your contracts were deliberately negotiated with flexibility in mind because both parties understood the importance of give and take. Eleanor was silent for a moment. So we simply enforce the contracts exactly as written? To the letter, I confirmed. No malice, no vendetta, just standard business practices. If Logan wants to renegotiate, he'll need to follow the proper procedures, which require 60 days written notice and board approval on our end, Eleanor finished, which would put any changes well into next quarter. When AGS's biggest orders are due, I added. Rachel Kim, Eleanor said, a note of admiration in her voice. Remind me never to cross you. I'm not doing anything, I said innocently. Just suggesting Dover Materials follow its long-established policies. After all, That's what any good business partner would advise. After hanging up, I sipped my coffee with renewed satisfaction. Logan would learn his first lesson in business the hard way. Respect isn't given, it's earned. And in the supply chain world, relationships were currency more valuable than cash. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. He just called demanding rush processing on yesterday's order. Informed him of the standard 20% rush fee per contract terms. He's apoplectic. And so, it begins, I thought. 3 weeks after Logan's disastrous meeting with Dover Materials, I received an unexpected visitor at my home. My former assistant, Me, stood on my doorstep, clutching a paper coffee cup like a lifeline. "I shouldn't be here," she blurted before I could even greet her. I ushered her inside quickly. "Is everything okay?" Me laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Nothing is okay. The office is in chaos. I had to tell someone who'd understand, and there's nobody left who..." She trailed off, looking guilty. "Who wasn't laid off," I finished gently. She nodded miserably. 3 more from the operations team yesterday. Logan brought in 2 of his business school friends instead. Neither has any supply chain experience. I led her to my kitchen table, poured her a glass of water, and waited. "It started with the Dover shipment delays," May continued. "Logan insisted they were being difficult on purpose. He didn't realize the rush fees had always been in the contract. He thought they were targeting him specifically. So he escalated, I guessed. He threatened to withhold payment on the last invoice unless they waived the rush fees. Dover responded by putting AGS on credit hold until all outstanding invoices were paid in full. I winced. Credit hold meant no new shipments until accounts were settled. For a company like AGS, which operated on a just-in-time inventory system I designed, even a short supply disruption could be catastrophic. Aldridge must be furious, I said. He blames Logan publicly but defends him behind closed doors, May confirmed. Meanwhile, production had to shut down Line 3 yesterday because we ran out of the M1340 components. The M1340, a critical proprietary part available exclusively through Dover. Without it, AGS couldn't complete assemblies for their highest margin product line. "What about the safety stock?" I asked. I'd always maintained a 2-week buffer of essential components. Me's expression darkened. "Logan authorized finance to sell it off 3 days after you left, called it activating dormant assets, and took credit for improving cash flow in his first week." I closed my eyes briefly. The sheer short-sightedness was staggering. "It gets worse," May continued. "When Dover wouldn't budge on credit terms, Logan tried to source the M1340 elsewhere." "That's impossible," I said. "Dover has an exclusive patent." "Exactly. But Logan found some supplier in Shenzhen claiming they could provide compatible components at half the price." My stomach dropped. Please tell me he didn't. He ordered 10,000 units, paid a 50% deposit, rushed delivery of course. And they arrived yesterday. They're completely unusable. Different pinouts, wrong materials, not even close to spec. QA rejected them immediately. 5,000 units at even half Dover's price would be nearly $300,000 wasted. And that was just the deposit. "Clients are starting to notice," May continued. "The Westbrook order is 2 weeks late now. They're threatening to invoke penalty clauses." Westbrook Technologies was AGS's largest client. Their contract, which I had negotiated, included substantial penalties for late delivery, a concession I'd made in exchange for a 3-year exclusive supplier agreement. "Has Aldridge tried contacting Dover's senior management?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Every day this week. They keep referring him back to their standard policies and procedures document." Mia paused. "It's weird. They're not being unreasonable. They're just being inflexible." I nodded noncommittally, sipping my tea. "This morning was the last straw," Mia said. "We received notice that Dover is invoking Section 17B of their supply agreement, the Volume Commitment Clause." I nearly choked. Section 17B had been my insurance policy, a clause requiring AGS to maintain minimum order volumes or face substantial price increases across all product lines. It had never been an issue because AGS had always exceeded the minimums. Until now, Logan's order reductions, I murmured. "Exactly. Dover's increasing prices by 22% effective immediately, citing AGS's failure to meet volume commitments, and they're requiring prepayment on all orders going forward. For a company already facing cash flow issues from production delays and client penalties, this was potentially fatal. The board called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning, Mee said. Rumor is they're considering a range of options, including selling off divisions to raise capital. She glanced at her watch and stood abruptly. I need to get back before anyone notices I'm gone. I thought you should know. I walked her to the door. Thank you, May. And be careful. After she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and called Eleanor. I was wondering when you'd call, she answered. I assume you've heard? Just got the update, I confirmed. The volume commitment clause was a nice touch. Standard business practice, Eleanor replied. But I could hear the smile in her voice. Just following the contract. Of course. I twirled my wine glass. I hear Aldridge has been trying to reach senior management. Yes, he's quite persistent. He seems to think there's someone he can appeal to above me. Someone who might understand his unique situation. And what have you told him? That all policy decisions of this magnitude require consultation with key investors, including our silent partner. My smile widened, and when might that consultation occur? I've scheduled a meeting for next Tuesday. I thought that would give the situation adequate time to develop fully. By Tuesday, AGS would be in full crisis mode. Production lines idle, clients threatening to cancel orders, the board in panic. Tuesday sounds perfect, I agreed. Some situations need time to reach their natural conclusion. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. William Aldridge has viewed your profile. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd anticipated. The board was getting nervous. Aldridge was looking for options, and I was watching it all unfold from a safe distance, ready to make my move when the time was right. The Dover Materials headquarters occupied a sleek glass building overlooking Lake Michigan. I'd visited dozens of times during my tenure at AGS, but never quite like this. Today, I arrived through the executive entrance, bypassing the usual visitor check-in. Eleanor's assistant escorted me directly to the top-floor boardroom, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline. Miss Kim, she said, opening the door, they're expecting you. I smoothed my navy suit, a new purchase, more expensive than anything I'd worn at AGS, and stepped inside. Eleanor stood at the head of the long mahogany table, engaged in light conversation with two Dover board members. In stark contrast to their relaxed demeanor, William Aldridge sat rigidly in a visitor's chair, his face flushed with barely contained frustration. His nephew Logan slouched beside him, looking simultaneously bored and terrified. None of them noticed me immediately, giving me a moment to savor the scene. Aldridge's normally immaculate appearance had deteriorated, his tie slightly askew, dark circles beneath his eyes, suggesting sleepless nights. Logan's designer suit couldn't hide his nervous fidgeting. Eleanor spotted me first, her professional smile widening almost imperceptibly. Ah, perfect timing. Mr. Aldridge, I'd like to introduce you to our key strategic investor, the silent partner I mentioned. Aldridge turned, his expression shifting from irritation to confusion to shock in rapid succession. He blinked rapidly, as if trying to dispel a hallucination. Rachel? I crossed the room with measured steps, extending my hand professionally. Mr. Aldridge, it's been 4 weeks now? Logan's head snapped up, his eyes widening as recognition dawned. Wait, you're the operations executive you replaced, I finished smoothly. Among other things, Aldridge found his voice, though it emerged strained. You're Dover's silent partner? That's not possible. I took a seat across from him, arranging my portfolio neatly on the table. Aurora Holdings is Dover's strategic investor. I am the sole proprietor of Aurora Holdings. It's all very straightforward, really. When did this happen? Aldridge demanded, looking between me and Eleanor. 6 months ago, Eleanor answered calmly. Well before any organizational changes at AGS. Aldridge's face darkened. This is a conflict of interest. It's unethical, possibly illegal. It's perfectly legal, I interjected, my voice cool. I checked with 3 separate corporate attorneys before proceeding. AGS has no policy prohibiting personal investments, and I disclosed all required information in my annual ethics statement. I simply wasn't required to specify which companies I invested in. You deliberately concealed. I protected my financial privacy, as is my right. I opened my portfolio, removing a stack of documents. But we're not here to discuss my investment strategies. We're here to discuss AGS's supply chain crisis. Logan, who had been watching this exchange with growing comprehension, suddenly leaned forward. You did this on purpose, he accused. You're sabotaging the company. I raised an eyebrow. I haven't made a single decision regarding Dover's policies toward AGS. I'm merely a silent partner. Dover is simply enforcing the exact terms of contracts that your uncle approved years ago. Eleanor nodded in agreement. As I've explained repeatedly, Mr. Aldrich, Dover Materials applies consistent policies across all our client relationships. The terms now being enforced are the standard terms that have always existed in our agreement. But you made exceptions before, Aldrich argued. For years, Dover has been flexible with payment terms, rush orders. Those weren't exceptions, I corrected him. They were relationship-based accommodations, built on years of mutual respect and trust. Relationships that your nephew systematically dismantled in less than a month. Logan's face flushed. You can't blame me for enforcing better terms for our company. Better terms? I echoed incredulously. You threatened a key supplier, violated contractual obligations, attempted source counterfeit components, and sold off critical safety stock. AGS's production lines are now idle. You're bleeding cash through penalty clauses, and Westbrook is threatening to pull their business entirely. Aldrich paled at the mention of Westbrook. How did you know about Westbrook? I smiled thinly. Supply chain management is about relationships, Mr. Aldrich. Something you never quite understood. Eleanor cleared her throat. Gentlemen, may I suggest we focus on solutions? Your situation is precarious, but not unsalvageable. Aldrich straightened his tie, visibly trying to regain composure. Of course. What are Dover's terms? Dover is prepared to resume normal shipping schedules and credit terms. Eleanor stated, conditional upon full payment of all outstanding invoices, a signed acknowledgement of the volume commitment clause, and, she paused meaningfully, appropriate leadership for the relationship going forward. Meaning? Aldrich asked cautiously. Meaning, I answered, that Dover has lost confidence in AGS's current operations management. As a significant investor in Dover, I share that concern. The implication hung in the air for a long moment before Aldrich understood. His eyes narrowed. You want your job back? Not exactly, I replied, sliding a document across the table. I'm not interested in being an employee again. But Dover would be comfortable resuming normal business relations if AGS contracted with my new consulting firm to oversee supply chain management. Logan sputtered. That's extortion. That's business, I corrected. You created this crisis, Mr. Aldrich. I'm offering a solution. Aldrich stared at the document, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. The choice before him was stark. Accept my terms and salvage what remained of AGS, or refuse and watch his company disintegrate. The board meeting is at 3, he said finally, his voice hollow. I'll need their approval. Of course, I agreed graciously. Eleanor has arranged a conference room where you can wait. I believe Dover's counsel would like to review the terms with you first. As Aldrich and Logan were escorted out, Eleanor turned to me with undisguised admiration. Remind me never to get on your bad side. I smiled, feeling the sweet satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. I prefer to think of it as cosmic balance. The universe has a way of correcting itself. Through the boardroom windows, I watched Aldrich and Logan follow Dover's counsel down the hallway, their shoulders slumped in defeat. The power had shifted, and it felt absolutely glorious. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation at Dover Materials, I stood in my new office, watching the autumn leaves dance across the Chicago skyline. The space occupied the entire top floor of a boutique office building in the West Loop, a far cry from the windowless interior office I'd inhabited at AGS. The door opened, and my executive assistant, me, entered with a tablet in hand. The quarterly numbers are in, she announced. Unable to suppress her smile, I gestured for her to continue. Kim Strategic Partners has officially crossed the 2 million mark in quarterly revenue. Projections for Q4 are even runner with the Westbrook exclusive contract kicking in next month. I nodded, satisfaction warming me from within. And our newest acquisition? The paperwork for the controlling stake in Dover Materials was finalized this morning. Eleanor called to congratulate you. She said the board is enthusiastically supportive of your leadership role. Of course they were. In the months since our confrontation with Aldridge, Dover's stock had risen 17% on news of their strategic partnership with my rapidly growing consulting firm. The additional capital I'd invested, largely from AGS consulting fees, had funded their eastern expansion, opening new markets across 3 states. And AGS? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Me's smile turned slightly wicked. Their Q3 earnings call is being described as catastrophic by industry analysts. They missed projections by 3. The board has called another emergency session for tomorrow. I turned back to the window, maintaining my composure despite the surge of vindication. AGS had been in free fall since our meeting 6 months ago. Aldridge had signed my consulting contract. He'd had no choice, but the damage Logan had inflicted went far deeper than supply chain disruptions. Client relationships had deteriorated, key staff had departed, and their reputation for reliability was in tatters. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from Eleanor. It's done. Aldridge just listed their headquarters building for sale. The final domino, with AGS hemorrhaging cash, selling off their iconic downtown office, was a desperate last attempt to stay afloat. The empire Aldridge had inherited from his father and that I'd helped build for a decade was crumbling before his eyes. Miss Kim? Me interrupted my thoughts. Daniel is here with lunch. My husband appeared in the doorway, carrying takeout bags from our favorite Vietnamese place. He'd been my rock throughout this entire journey, first supporting my risky investment in Dover, then helping me launch Kim Strategic Partners when the opportunity arose. Celebrating the Dover deal? He asked, noting the champagne May was arranging. Among other things, I replied. As we settled into the comfortable seating area of my office, spreading out containers of pho and spring rolls, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a name I hadn't expected. William Aldridge. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won out. Excuse me a moment, I said to Daniel and May, stepping toward my desk. Mr. Aldridge, I answered, keeping my tone professionally neutral. This is unexpected. Rachel. His voice sounded worn, defeated. I won't waste your time. I'm calling offer you something. I waited silently. The board has, he hesitated, requested my resignation. Effective next week. This wasn't surprising, but hearing it directly from him was satisfying nonetheless. I'm sorry to hear that, I lied smoothly. No, you're not, he replied with unexpected candor. And you shouldn't be. I made a terrible mistake letting you go. Business decisions don't require explanation, Mr. Aldridge. I echoed his words from that fateful day in his office. You taught me that. He absorbed the barb without complaint. The board is prepared to offer you the CEO position. They believe you're the only one who can salvage what's left of AGS. For a moment, I was speechless. The perfect revenge was being handed to me. The opportunity to take his job, to sit in his corner office, to have him watch as I restored what he and Logan had destroyed. But I'd outgrown AGS. My consulting firm was already generating more revenue than my old executive salary, with clients who valued my expertise. My stake in Dover gave me security and influence in the industry. I wasn't just rebuilding my career, I was creating something far more powerful. I'm flattered, I said finally, but I must decline. My commitments to Kim Strategic Partners and Dover Materials take priority. Silence stretched across the line before Aldridge spoke again. Will you at least consider consulting on the transition, the company? There are still good people there. This was true. Despite everything, I didn't wish hardship on the rank-and-file employees who'd had no part in Aldridge's decisions. I'll have May send over a proposal, I conceded. Standard consulting rates. Thank you, he said quietly. And Rachel, for what it's worth, I was wrong about you, about everything. I ended the call without responding. His belated recognition meant nothing to me now. Returning to the lunch spread, I found Daniel watching me with a knowing expression. Aldridge? He guessed. I nodded, pouring champagne into 3 glasses. The board fired him. They wanted me as CEO. And end? May asked, though she clearly already knew my answer. I raised my glass, and I declined. Why would I go backward when we're building something so much better? We clinked glasses, celebrating not just the Dover acquisition or the consulting contract numbers, but the complete transformation of my professional life. In just 6 months, I'd gone from discarded executive to industry powerhouse. To Kim's strategic partners, Daniel toasted. To Dover's eastern expansion, May added. I smiled, thinking of Aldridge packing up his office, of Logan updating his resume, of the AGS board scrambling to salvage what remained of their company. 2 unexpected opportunities, I said, and the wisdom to see them coming.